Well, back to the listed space now, and critical minerals are called such because they are, well, critical to modern technologies, economies, or national security, and that there's a risk supply chains could be disrupted. So Western governments, including our own, want to expand the critical minerals sector and, importantly, downstream processing to grow Australia's position globally as a secure, reliable, and ethical supplier of critical minerals. Well, Arafura Rare Earths is moving toward a final investment decision for the Nolans project, which will encompass a mine, processing plant, and related infrastructure in the Northern Territory. It's a huge rare earth deposit, and it's the type of rare earths, just to simplify things, that are used in industrial magnets. It has a really big backer in Gina Reinhart's Hancock Prospecting and has attracted a cornerstone equity investor. So Arafura has had quite a lot of news flow as of late. So I began by asking CEO Darryl Cuzzubbo about the recently inked binding offtake agreement with Traxys Europe.
So just a bit of context, we need to get to about 80% of our production with binding offtakes, and we're about 66% of the way there. The Traxys agreement is a very helpful one for us because it gives us a trader's avenue into the market and gives us optionality. So it's for volumes and minimum volumes of 100 tonnes of NdPr per annum, but up to 300 tonnes at our discretion. So from a lender perspective, it accounts for 300 tonnes, but it gives us optionality with other strategics in other regions.
Well, what is the status of other binding offtake agreements? You know, how far along are you when it comes to offtake agreements in general?
Yeah, so our biggest draw card in pulling in strategic equity is the offtakes. So we've been engaging with quite a large number of organisations who want our offtakes, and we're engaging with many more than we can satisfy. We expect to pull in one or two large strategics with the remaining offtakes that we have available. And we're using that offtakes to pull in that strategic equity. So you'll expect to see announcement around the remaining offtakes, most likely linked to equity.
So you're saying there's more under discussion as we speak?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we would be in advanced discussions with parties that would see more than 3 times the volumes that we've got available to be contracted. So we've got a healthy competition for the remaining volumes.
Well, I think I got ahead of myself, excited about, you know, the announcements that have just sort of come to market in the last couple of weeks. But, you know, that agreement is contingent, a big contingency on the construction, development of Nolans and the beginning of commercial production and ramp up by the end of December 2028. So perhaps now is a good time for a bit of a status update on the Nolan project itself.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of context, so we see demand for rare earths more than doubling over the next 10 years, driven predominantly by EVs and wind turbines. And then after that, it'll be driven by robotics to an even higher level again. And if you look at the pipeline of supply projects, it is pretty spare. And we're one of the very, very few that's construction ready and can bypass the supply chain of China, which controls nearly 90% of supply. So we're in terms of where we're up to, so we're construction ready. So what that means is we've got all of the approvals that we need, all of the environmental approvals. We've done the engineering we need. We've got the management team in place. We've secured over $1 billion of debt, and now we are chasing down the equity. On the equity side, we want to get to 60% of that equity, 50 to 60% of that equity from cornerstone investors before going to the public market. And we're well on the track of achieving that and making good progress towards that 50 to 60% target.
It's not without its challenges, though. I do note that you signed a letter of intent, I believe it was, with Tamboran Resources to get gas from the Beetaloo in the NT to Nolans. Because you had a lapse in a previous gas agreement, is that one of the biggest challenges, getting the infrastructure in place, the gas, the water, and the like?
So generally, I would say yes, but not so much in this particular case. So if you look at the Northern Territory, they're opening up additional gas reserves. So that's obviously good from a gas pricing perspective. With the Mereenie JV, for that agreement to be satisfied, we needed to have got to an FID decision by the end of last month, so by the end of March, which we didn't. But we've engaged with Tamboran, and the letter of intent was announced just yesterday. Tamboran are accessing a much larger reserve that can provide us gas for many, many years. So it made sense for us to switch to a gas supply that is coming on and that will have many, many years because they'll be accessing much larger reserve.
All right. You mentioned, Cornerstone Equity Partners. Back in January, Arafura received $200 million from the National Reconstruction Funding Scheme, which was the first equity Cornerstone deal. You've also got about $840 million in loans from the federal government, from what I can see. So why is it that taxpayers, that the government should be helping bring this development, this project to fruition?
I would offer two reasons. So firstly, these agreements, whether it's done on the debt side or the convertible note that was done with the National Reconstruction Fund, is done on commercial terms. So the Australian government and hence the taxpayers will make money out of it. So on the debt side, we have to pay back the principal, we have to pay it back with interest, and it's on commercial terms. So I would say this is an example where the Australian government has been supporting our project and getting the rare earth sector up in a commercially savvy way. The second reason it's important for our investors to see that Australia, to see that also the support that we've got from the German government, the Canadian government, the Korean government, that like-minded countries are committed to seeing them diversify the rare earth supply chain away from China. So investors can't control whether there is a diversification away from the China supply chain. But like-minded countries can do that, whether that's through trade restrictions, tariffs, etc. And investors want to know that these like-minded countries are committed to that. And a way to show them is that the Australian government, as well as other governments, have got skin in the game here.
Yeah, well, that sort of leads me to my next question, because there are a number of rare earth projects, not just operating, but in the pipeline, not just here in Australia, but in other jurisdictions. So where does this Nolans project sit in terms of progress to commercialization as compared to other countries and projects there? I guess it's a very basic question about competition. Like, is this a competitive space? Do you need to race to be first into production to get these potentially lucrative offtake agreements?
Yeah, not at all. So if you look at the pipeline, it's actually pretty sparse. And most of the rare earth projects are in the concept of pre-feasibility phase. So when you consider that on average, it takes you 18 years to find an ore body and take it all the way into commercial production, we're at the very front of the queue. What differentiates us, in fact, I would say we're the only ones globally, is that we're construction ready. So we've done all the work, we've got all the approvals, we're ready to move into construction. And the second thing that differentiates us is that we're ore to oxide. And what that means is we process all the way to an oxide that now enables us to bypass the China supply chain and sell directly to magnet manufacturers and OEMs. If you look at the vast majority of rare earth projects, they only go to a concentrate or a carbonate, not all the way to an oxide. What that means is they're dependent on processing capability that today only exists in China. So we are quite unique in being construction ready and unique in that we will have the processing capability to bypass the China supply chain. There actually isn't much competition.
Interesting. And I suppose we've all heard the line that rare earths aren't actually that rare. Are our customers willing to pay a premium for supply that's coming out of anywhere but China?
Yes. So let me address 2 points there. So firstly, rare earths are not that rare. However, economic deposits of rare earths are. So yes, you might find rare earths in many locations, but they're at a grade that will not support economic development. So in terms of economic ore bodies, they actually are quite rare. Now, in terms of your second part of the question, will customers pay a premium? So with the offtake agreements that we've got pricing floors. So what that means, and the pricing floor is substantially above where the pricing is at the moment. So that's our way of making sure that, under worst case scenarios, we can pay back our interest, depreciation, and still have a cash margin. And off-takers have been prepared to do that because they're valuing supply security more than, if you like, a pricing point under all scenarios. But the other point I would make here, which I think is very important, the average price of an electric vehicle last year globally was in the order of $53,000 US. The cost of the NdPr, the neodymium and praseodymium rare earths that enables the magnet to enable the electric vehicle, was $60. So the question I would offer is, if you had to pay 3 times the price, which is an extra $120 an electric vehicle, would you pay that to get an electric vehicle out the door? And I think the answer to that is yes. And the reason why I mentioned 3 times the price is Argus, as a price forecaster, has done a fair amount of work in this area where they believe we need to see a pricing point that's 3 times the current spot price to see an incentive price to get sufficient rare earth supply long-term into the market.
Because the rare earths price has been under a lot of pressure thanks to China flooding the market with supply. Back to Nolans, though. I believe I read in some of your ASX announcements that you're planning on making the final investment decision by mid-2025. So presumably to do so, you'd need to have more equity in the offing. Are you still looking to adhere to that timeline?
Yeah, so that's been our latest advice. We've made good progress towards that. We've got clear line of sight to achieving that. This is through both government-seeded bodies as well as cornerstone investors. We'll obviously give more of an update as we've got more to share. But yeah, we're making good progress along those lines.
Yes, so one of your largest shareholders, of course, is Hancock Prospecting, owned by Gina Rinehart. So do you anticipate that some of your institutional investors, your largest shareholders, will cough up more?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to talk on the behalf of Hancock, but what I will say is they've been very supportive. And as you know, they've invested in a number of rare earth companies and they're supportive of the sector.
Darryl, what do you think will cause a significant re-rating of Arafura's market capitalization?
Yes, that's a good question. So if you look at our market cap compared to, there's only 2 producers, which is outside of China, which is Mountain Pass and Lynas. And if you look at our market cap, there's like a 10 to 15-fold difference for volumes that are either similar or 50% more. And the 2 things that are standing in the way of, I think, achieving that sort of market cap is, 1, funding, so securing the remaining equity. And then the second one is obviously building the project and ramping it up. The third factor, of course, is NdPr pricing. So I think if, in the past when there's been a supply disruption, you've seen the pricing close to triple, or in some cases more than triple. And you can see that would have a dramatic impact on our market cap as well.
And Darryl, just final question. Are you satisfied with the level of support that you've been getting from this government, from any future government? We've got a federal election knocking on our door. Do you anticipate that there would be any significant change to critical materials or future Made in Australia funding that could put the Nolans project at risk?
Yeah, look, I don't think we could have asked for any more support from the current government, and I'd like to think we'd get that same support from from the opposition as well. This is win-win, right? So it's a high downstream value add proposal. Our phase two, which would more than double production, would also incorporate becoming a processing hub for other rare earths projects, and we think that would play a key role in enabling the rest of Australia's rare earth sector, because if they used our processing facilities, which is very capital intensive, they would only need 30% of the capital intensity to get up. So I think if we get up, we move on to phase two and become a processing hub, we'll see other rare earth projects throughout, particularly the northern part of Australia, get up as well. So I think why wouldn't we enjoy support of both political parties?